Our almighty blue planet, the only place in the solar system where life can exist. We know that air, water, and many other elements are key to the survival of any carbon-based living organism. But one thing which we take for granted is the Earth's rotation around the sun. We already know that Earth's rotation is gradually slowing down, but what would happen if the Earth suddenly stopped spinning? Earth spins on its axis once every 24-hour day. While the speed is more or less constant, but since the Earth is round in shape, the speed depends on what latitude you are located at. For example, at the equator, the Earth's spin is about 1,000 miles per hour or 1,600 kilometers per hour. Although it's not likely possible, but for the sake of science, let's say we stop the rotation of the planet to 0 miles per hour. Of course, if you suddenly stop the Earth from spinning, most of our planet would rapidly become very inhospitable. The atmosphere would still be in motion with the Earth's original 1,000 miles per hour rotation speed at the equator. All of the land masses would be scoured clean of anything not attached to bedrock. This means rocks, topsoil, trees, buildings, and your sweet little pet dog, and so on, would be all swept away into the atmosphere. The oceans would migrate towards the poles from the equator. At first, only small regions of the terra firma around the equator would rise of the retreating waters. Eventually, there would be a huge magma continent wrapped continuously around the Earth at the equator. You could travel around the Earth on the equator and stay entirely on dry land, ignoring the freezing cold in the night side and the searing heat on the day side, of course. The water that left the equatorial regions would have to go somewhere, and that somewhere would be the poles. There would be two totally disconnected polar oceans on each side of the equatorial megacontinent. In the north, Canada would be entirely underwater, and roughly following the line of the border of current-day USA and Canada. All of Greenland, as well as northern plains of Siberia, Asia, and Europe would be underwater. However, Spain would mostly stay above water. Half of the planet would almost continuously face the heat of the sun, while the other half would face the cold of space. Life could continue in a narrow twilight zone between the hot and cold halves, but the atmosphere would be chaotic for survival. The surface temperature would depend on your latitude, being far hotter than it is now at the equator than at the poles where the light rays are more slanted and heating efficiency is lower. This long-term temperature gradient would alter the atmospheric wind circulation pattern so that the air would move from the equator to the poles rather than in the wind systems parallel to the equator like they are now. If you move along constant lines of Earth latitude, you would see the elevation of the sun increase or decrease in the sky just as we now see the elevation of the sun change from a single point on the Earth due to the Earth's daily rotation. As for other effects, presumably, the magnetic field of the Earth is generated by a dynamo effect that involves its rotation. If the Earth stopped rotating, its magnetic field would no longer be regenerated and it would decay away to some low residual value due to the small component which is fossilized in its iron-rich rocks. There would be no more northern lights, and the Van Allen radiation belts would probably vanish. Then Earth would be naked against the fury of the sun. Every time it sent a coronal mass ejection towards the Earth, it would hit the surface and bathe everything in radiation. This is a significant biohazard. All of these effects are scary and horrible, but you don't have to worry as NASA says the probability for Earth stopping its spin is practically zero, for the next few billion years at least. Now let's talk about what if the Earth picked up a second moon? Well, you know what? That actually sounds like something we should discuss on another episode of Discover Zen.